Hi guys, so on our quest to become titled chess players, Michael and I have been spending our Sunday evenings going through Silman's complete Endgame course. We've been going through the problems at the end of each chapter to make sure we thoroughly understand the material, and I thought it would be good to let you guys in on it. So if you find the material useful or enjoyable, like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get right into it. Okay, so this position comes from a game that was played between some random person and the world-famous Howard Staunton, played in 1842, and I will say that my analysis will differ quite substantially to that given by Silman himself in the book, just because I'm throwing in some extra twists and turns, some sub-variations that might look tempting, but might not be quite optimal, things like that. So without further ado, the prompt for this exercise is, should white keep the rooks or exchange? So I want you to pause your videos and take some time to consider the ramifications of the exchange on f6. Alright, so the first thing you should notice about the position after the trade on f6 is that the nature of these pawns is going to drastically change. And that is because this pawn is going to turn into an f-pawn, and this pawn is going to become passed. So we're going to get a position where both sides have a new passed pawn, and the resulting positions are going to be quite sharp and forcing, and therefore will require some concrete calculation. So going forward a few moves after the trade, we'll see what happens. So if rook takes f6, g takes f6, white has to do something about the passed f-pawn. And not only that, but black has this queenside majority which he's going to have to contend with, and if left unchecked, that majority is going to be strong enough to create a passed pawn all on its own. So white's king is actually going to be needed on the queen side eventually, which means that this pawn needs to be taken care of before he's able to do that. So first order of business is to somehow get rid of this f-pawn. So white needs to come towards it naturally. King g4. Alright, both sides activate their king, and h5. So in order to, white notices that in order to be able to capture this pawn on f6, that he's going to need to use his own passed pawn as a decoy in order to deflect the enemy king away from the defense of the pawn on f6. So he starts pushing it, and I should note that at this point the moves king f5 and h5 are interchangeable and do transpose. So the moves king f5 and h5 are both good tries. We'll see if they're good enough. So with this move c5, black has solidified his queenside pawn majority, but it should be noted that let's say black was careless and played a move like b5 thinking it achieved the same thing, that this would be a tragic mistake, because now white is on the winning side after b4. Because now what we can notice is that our pawn on b4 is actually restricting black's pawns on a7 and c6. And now black has no hope of utilizing his queenside majority to create a passed pawn. So after c5, king f5, and now b5, making some progress on the queen side. Now things are getting critical, and white needs to hurry up and win this f-pawn so that his king can rush to the defense of the queen side. So h6, c4, h7, king g7, just making sure that this pawn doesn't promote. We promote anyway, deflecting the king from the pawn on f6. King takes f6. And now the question is, after a5, are we too late to stop black's far advanced queenside majority? And technically you should already have the answer to this from your previous calculations, but I'll give you one more chance to pause your video and make a final determination whether white can stop the forward progress of these queenside pawns in time. And the answer, perhaps unsurprisingly, is white's king is in time after king e5, b4. And now a very important move is needed here. When I showed this position to Michael, for the most part he was spot on, except for in this position he wanted to play the move king d4, which in this case this would be a decisive error for white because black has the move c3. And now white's king can't hope to stop the promotion of these pawns. And that's because if we try something like a takes b4, then just c2. And white's king is outside of the square of the pawn, so black's promoting. Yep, and king d3 runs into c takes b2, followed by b takes a3, and black is going to be able to promote those pawns. And if white think he can do better by taking the pawn on c3, then he would be mistaken after b takes a3, and now the a pawn is promoting. So, all that being said, in this position, instead of king d4, white must play a takes b4. And this ensures that black is not going to be able to utilize his majority to promote his pawns. After a takes b4, now we can go king d4. And now we're just going to be able to win the b and c pawns, and it will be a draw. After something like c3, b takes c3. And if black wants to get tricky, he might actually go ahead and try b3 here as one last-ditch winning attempt. It should be obvious that after king d3, black actually is not promoting his pawn. But it's actually black here who needs to play accurately in order not to lose the game. So if black tries something like b2, you might be surprised to know that black is actually lost here for a very subtle reason that is very instructive and important to remember in all king and pawn endgames. That after the pawn is captured, we are able to actually bring our king in front of the pawn, resulting in a one king and pawn endgame. Just to play a few more moves, we're able to get this classic opposition where our king is in front of the pawn, and not only that, but it's two spaces in front of the pawn, which means that we're going to have no problem converting this. And the pawn will promote. So going back to the position before b2 was played, black actually must play a move that brings his king closer to white's pawn, king g8 for instance. And the critical difference between king g8 and b2 is that if black tries to make progress now with his own pawn, c4, by the way, if he doesn't play c4, then it's not really clear what he's doing because the b pawn will always threaten to promote. So after c4, now b2, and we capture the pawn in this position, the critical difference is that the pawn is further advanced on the c4 square, which means that it's actually black's king who's going to be able to get in front of white's pawn first, and should be able to achieve a drawing position relatively easily. So I'll give a sample line with relatively natural moves. And we can notice here that the position, that black has the opposition and white has nothing better than to force a stalemate. So well done if you're able to correctly evaluate from the starting position that the trade on f6 is actually forcibly drawn for white, and this is accomplished by just advancing his h-pawn and eventually using it as a decoy so he can capture the f-pawn, and then just rushing his king over to the queen side in time before the majority is able to be made use of. Oh, and bonus points if you're able to spot that it's white who's actually on the winning side if black tries b2 in those lines. But if you didn't get it right, you're in good company because rook d2 was actually the move that was played rather than rook takes f6, and black actually went on to win. And this is because rook and pawn endgames are notorious for being very difficult to play precisely in, especially on the defending side. So I want to emphasize that it's very much worth taking the time to calculate in positions like these where you're offered a trade into a king and pawn endgame where the result could actually be in your favor. Alright, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time.